All right, so thanks everyone for sticking around. It's been a long day. My name is Adam van Widdem. I'm technical editor at Bitcoin Magazine. And so I'm hosting the privacy panel. We've had a bunch of talks on privacy already. I think it would be interesting also to close off this day to have a discussion that's a little less technical and a bit more focused on the practical challenges of achieving privacy. There's a lot of conferences like this, and there's a lot of proposals for how to improve privacy. A lot of smart people is coming up with all sorts of great solutions. In the meantime, the actual practical privacy that we have today seems rather limited. So I'm wondering if there's other bottlenecks. Could be political. Adam already mentioned he was detained at the airport. These sorts of things. Coordination between wallets. Are we good or? All right, let's start with the introduction round where everyone, well, we've already had both of you on stage, but maybe people missed it, or maybe you can quickly explain who you are, what are you working on? Adam? Oh, Thomas, you start.
Okay, so can you hear me? I'm Thomas Voegtlin.
It's not. Do you want this one?
All right, yeah. Okay, so I'm Thomas Voegtlin, the creator and main developer of the Electrum wallet.
Yeah, can you hear me? I guess.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay, great. My name is Tim Ruffing. I was doing PhD at Saarland University in Germany. I'm not yet fully finished, but almost. And since 1st of May, I work for I work for Blockstream, and my research was always focused on privacy and Bitcoin. I was doing projects like Coin Shuffle, Value Shuffle. Have you heard of that? So, yeah, that's it.
Can you hear me? No. Okay. I'm Adam. I'm going with the handle NoPara73. And I'm working on a Bitcoin privacy-oriented wallet called Wasabi Wallet.
Hello, can you hear me? Yeah. My name's Adam Gibson. Sorry, you can call me Waxwing if you prefer, so he can be Adam. I've worked on various bits of sort of Bitcoin-related tech, but mostly join market, and I do some research into things like confidential transactions and stuff. So. But join market is my main sort of area that I've contributed.
Yeah, typical privacy talks like on this conference sort of start with how to achieve privacy. I think it would be a good foundation for the rest of the discussion to actually touch on, because this is obvious for many, maybe also in the room or at least on stage, but not as obvious for the rest of the world. Why do we actually care about privacy? Why does Bitcoin need to be private? So if you want to start, Adam.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So I mean, there's an obvious answer as to why Bitcoin should be private, in as much as individual. You don't want other people knowing your business. Basically, it's intimately connected with the question of. It's intimately connected with the question of how fungible Bitcoin is, which I briefly touched on in my talk. If payments are not private, it affects fungibility. Businesses need privacy for their payments, so it's not just a matter of individuals, and it's certainly not just a matter of criminals. I think perhaps people get a bit confused because they have in mind correctly that they are not really private from the authorities, your bank, and by one or two levels of indirection, the authorities either do or can know everything about your finances, but that's obviously not the same model as we have with a Bitcoin, which is not private, because that means everybody, criminals, hackers, everybody knows your business if your Bitcoin payments are not private.
Why is that a bad thing?
I just said criminals and hackers know your. Well, I mean, okay. Some simple scenarios would be, you know, you have $1 million in some cold storage wallet, and you choose to pay for a coffee, and the change output is shown as, or the input is shown as $1 million. So the barista knows you've got $1 million and phones up his mates around the corner, and they come around your house and they tie you to a chair and they get the private key. And it doesn't matter how clever your 24 words seed whatever is. It doesn't matter how well, in other words, you made sure your Bitcoin was in quotes secure. That's what they call the $5 wrench attack. Yeah, you can get attacked physically. So that's the most obvious reason why privacy is important. But you can come up with 10 more if you want. I'm sure I'd rather cede ground to others because they have.
You want to add something, Adam?
Yes, I have a very simple take on this. We are building money, and we have some kind of axiomatic knowledge that what money has to do, and it has some properties like divisibility, fungibility, transportability, and so on. And fungibility is directly related to privacy. So we are building money. We have to improve this property of the money.
Tim?
Yeah, I guess there are, even if you would ignore fungibility, which is super important, I think there are it could come up, I guess, with 1,000 reasons why people could use privacy, right? I don't want everybody in the world to know how much money I have, how much taxes I pay, where I spend my money. This is then even extends to location privacy. I don't know if you can observe that at the moment I'm doing a transaction to buy a coffee at some random place, you can even know where I am, right? So this is, and it's much worse actually with Bitcoin than what we initially have in our mind. So our mind model about banking is different, right? There's a little bit privacy if you trust the bank. Okay, it's not our goal to trust banks here, for sure. But for privacy, maybe this model was even a little bit better. And now we have Bitcoin. And in Bitcoin, we're spreading our transactions to the entire world, basically. And I guess a lot of people are not aware of the consequences of that.
Yeah, let me ask one additional question before we go to Thomas. So, for example, last week there was a news report about, I think it was in the US before Congress, where there was a call to crack down on privacy coins. And so Bitcoin may be sort of allowed in that model, but if it becomes more private, maybe it becomes a bigger target for authorities. Is that any sort of argument against privacy?
Well, Bitcoin is growing at the same time. It has been more, at the beginning, Bitcoin was perceived as something for drug dealers. It's no longer the case. So I think that Bitcoin can actually evolve in the direction of more privacy without making it a target, because it has reached a critical mass. And I would also like to say that fungibility is very important. If you do not have fungibility, then it's no longer money.
Right. So how bad is the situation today, do you guys think? Is it as bad as people think? Is there no privacy basically in Bitcoin, or is it not as bad as sometimes people suggest it is? Tim, you want to start?
Yeah, I think that's hard to answer. Basically, we know that there are companies already, like I think Adam mentioned this in the talk, that are offering de-anonymization services essentially to governments, but also to everybody. I haven't tried it. Maybe I can get an account. No idea if they let me in, but to play around with it. But yeah, it's not like in the beginning people have started to look at this from an academic point of view, but nowadays it's really a business, and I know that these companies make money with that, so I guess they are successful in some sense.
Yeah, if you want an account, you'd better pay up.
Yeah.
If you want the full service, yeah. I think a lot of them have websites, you can just see some basic thing where they show you some wallet clustering, but if you want their full service, it's not cheap.
So, does anyone want to add anything to this, or?
I think my perspective is that it is actually very, very bad today. but I have a sort of nuance to that, which is I think the main reason it's really terrible today is because the vast majority of people just basically buy their bitcoins on Coinbase or places like that, and then they buy some altcoins on Binance or places like that, and then they take them out, and then they mess around with banks because banks are horrible about this. And that's all they really do. And because of that, you don't really need blockchain analysis. I mean, if you just bought Monero and then you sold it, what difference does it make? It's still your name recorded on with the KYC at the exchange, That's why I think if people were like using it like to buy coffee and all that stuff, then at least it'd be more difficult.
Right. So we've had a couple of proposals today or ideas on how to improve privacy, and we've had a number of these over the years, whether it's CoinShuffle, ValueShuffle, Tumblebit, which you worked on, CoinJoin. Lightning is now becoming a topic where privacy could be improved. Sometimes I wonder, is there something going on where the perfect is becoming the enemy of the good, where different projects are popping up and then the previous project is being abandoned? For example, Adam, you worked on Tumblebit for a while, and that seems to be you've abandoned that idea, I think. And
it was never fully explored. The payment hub mode was Tumblebit's full. The strongness of Tumblebit was the payment hub mode. We just found that too difficult to implement, so we only implemented the classic Tumblr mode, which I think has been superseded by other technology.
Right, but because it's superseded by other technology, which doesn't yet exist, now no one's using Tumblebit. So is that a problem where should the people who care about privacy settle on a solution somehow and sort of focus on that and forget about the rest, even if something better comes along, or how do you see this?
You can think about Tumblebit that no one ever started to implement it yet because no one ever did the payment hub mode. Now, should we settle on a thing and roll out something? Yes, that's what I am doing. I'm trying to roll out something that people can use with the wallet. Yeah.
Tim?
Yeah, I think it's one thing to add here is that it turns out to be incredibly hard to build privacy on. So we're building on Bitcoin, but building privacy on top of Bitcoin is super hard without changing the fundamentals of Bitcoin, I think. And this is where often those projects run into problems, right? They look nice on paper, and Tumblebit looks nice on paper. Also, CoinShuffle looks certainly much nicer on paper than it would look in practice. And I think all of the CoinJoin approaches are actually very hard to deploy in practice. For example, one of the hardest problems is that we have the transaction amounts in public, because let's say you know that tomorrow I will buy a T-shirt for 0.1 Bitcoin. I don't know. If this is really a bad example, you know the exact amount, right? I can apply all of the anonymization techniques I have. Like it doesn't help. If you know that I will buy this tomorrow for this amount, you will recognize it. And this makes it incredibly hard to build anonymity on top of Bitcoin, and it also it creates problems for usability. For example, with the mixing solutions, if we can try to mix coins with CoinShuffle, but then we need, again, because the amounts are public, we need to mix the same amounts. I think Adam nicely showed that in the talk, and I think this adds a lot of complexity to all of those solutions that maybe are not so obvious when you first look at them.
You know what is very interesting, that your project is CoinShuffle and my project is Xiaomi and CoinJoin, and your project is basically decentralized version of my project, and that's what it's. So if you look at it on paper, it's just a vastly superior thing. But everyone who started to implement CoinShuffle, they implemented with a server in a centralized way. And if you go on that route, So obviously, it's not like the centralized mixers what we have today. That so both with CoinShuffle and with Xiaomi and CoinJoin, you cannot, the server cannot, no one can steal and no one can de-anonymize. But now they are implementing your project in a centralized way that becomes more slower than my project in a centralized way as it was designed, and also more susceptible to different kind of attacks. If they are implementing it in a centralized way.
Who's implementing it?
So there was Mycelium's what shuffle path, and BCH guys implemented cache shuffle. Which, what do you think about that?
So you mentioned that it's a more decentralized version of CoinJoin, and I'm not sure if this is actually true. I think in theory you can do it like in a really decentralized manner, but this is so slow that nobody would ever do it, basically. I think like a reasonable implementation of CoinShuffle would still use a single point. I mean, you don't need one single point, you just need a server that broadcasts messages. You don't trust it for anything, it just needs to be there. If it goes offline, you take another one. That's not the issue. But if you don't want to use the single server, then it's terribly slow. And okay, for the two implementations, actually, I think this was an interesting example for Shufflepuff, because they maybe thought that the perfect is the enemy of the good, because they were starting to implement our first version, the CoinShuffle 1. Then while they were doing that, we came up with CoinShuffle++, which is so much faster and so much better. And we told them, okay, just throw it away, start from scratch. It's even simpler to implement. But they continued with the old version, and then they never really finished it. So I think in that case, it would actually have been better to throw away the old one, just switch to the new one. I don't know.
So I'm also wondering, so you're implementing a privacy wallet now. It's beneficial, I would assume, at least for different wallets to be compatible. For you get a bigger anonymity set. Is that possible at all? Is that desirable at all? Is there any coordination between wallets to settle on a solution, work on a standard or anything like this? Should this happen? Is this happening?
So it's a very good question, and there were a couple of questions in that. One is other wallet compatibility, if it's desirable. It's great because it gives a lot of liquidity, anonymity set, so the round's gonna be much faster, like maybe even seconds. But on the other hand, what the wallets do before and after the mix is different and leave different metadata, which enables some kind of assumptions and connect the links. So multiple implementations from a privacy point of view, good for liquidity, but for privacy.
But that could also be standardized across wallets, or not?
A lot of things can be standardized across wallets, and there were a lot of tries. People tried it a lot of times, but.
Thomas, do you want to weigh in here?
Yeah, I think that the privacy equation is going to be completely modified by Lightning. So for the moment, I would say that implementing CoinJoin or that kind of proposal is not a priority for us, because if we do not allocate our resources to Lightning, in like maybe one year from now, we're going to be dead. But Lightning is also going to change privacy a lot in Bitcoin. If I was, like this morning, you were explaining that you changed the name of your proposal from Wasabi Wallet, what was the Hidden Wallet to Wasabi Wallet. And I really like that because it tells a lot about the kind of pressure that wallet developers can have if they explicitly build in privacy features. So if we build Lightning, Lightning is presented as a scalable as a scalability solution, but it has a side effect of privacy. We could imagine that the people who invented Lightning thought about it as a kind of super network of Tumblebit servers connected together that can do routing. And then they would call it the dark network or whatever. If they went to see your lawyer, the lawyer maybe told them, no, the dark network is really a bad name for this. Call it the Lightning network. And here it goes. So I think Lightning is really our priority now, because even if it's presented as a scalability solution, it's also a solution to improve privacy in Bitcoin. And once this is established, once this is accepted, maybe there will be less pressure for on-chain privacy. Yeah, that's what I.
Right, so that's an interesting topic. So there's pressure on wallet developers to not make their wallets too private. Is that what you're saying, or is that what you're suspecting?
I have never been retained in an airport. I don't know about that. But on the other hand, I've always been very careful about not breaking the law, because I also think that it could be a way for, I mean, okay, Electrum is an open source project, but it's also a company. The company can be shut down, the project will survive, but on the other hand, it might not have the same resources as today if it's shut down. So,
right.
Yeah.
So you consider it a threat to be shut down?
I never had any concrete threat, no.
Right.
I just don't think it would be reasonable to explicitly provide tools that are presented with the intent of breaking the law.
Right. So if it's a tool that happens to be more private, like Lightning,
that's perfect.
You think it's probably fine. If it's a tool that's specifically designed to gain privacy, it may be a bit of an issue.
Who knows what Lightning was designed for?
Fair point. Adam, do you want to weigh in here? Working on CoinJoin.
Sorry, what's the question again? It was a long time ago. What's the question again?
So if you provide a solution that happens to be more private, then there may not be regulatory pressure. Well, if you provide something, if you build something with the intent for privacy, then you may get in trouble for.
Okay, forgive me for reinterpreting the question into a more sort of theoretical sense than the intended practical sense. But what I think is really interesting there is there's a kind of template here. What Thomas just said about Lightning is obviously exactly correct, but to me, what's important there is the off-chainness of it. Because I remember saying this once before, is like, when we go off-chain, we kind of cut the Gordian knot of scalability and privacy. You know, like confidential transactions is a way of creating a much better privacy model, but it requires a lot more data and maybe a lot more, computation, verification. But we take stuff off-chain, like we're changing the meaning of the on-chain transactions. Like in my example at the end there, I was saying how, when you look on the chain, you don't know like the channel balance. So that there's missing data there. And you can come up with much more exotic models, like some of the stuff that Jonas Nick was talking about with various kinds of blind signature-based coin swaps. You can have situations where the actual transaction you see on chain, you might think that's a payment from Alice to Bob, but actually that interpretation may be wrong. Lightning is kind of one angle of that. So I've lost my train of thought. Does that make any sense? Well, I don't know what I was thinking.
About Lightning, that has its own trade-offs. I think it's not necessarily always more private. Does anyone know more about that?
It's different.
It's different.
I think it's necessary.
Is it still working?
Is it still? Yeah. Okay. No, Lightning does not leave a trail on the blockchain, so that's very different in the sense that the data is not publicly available. It's with that respect, it's more similar to the banking model, where your data is actually known from a small number of actors. But
are you referring to like Lightning hubs here, or?
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, Lightning hubs could actually be used as a monitoring tool. But so there is onion routing, there is a different things that are designed in order to preserve privacy in the Lightning Network.
Right.
But I'm referring mostly to the way naive users are thinking about their money. I mean, they usually trust a bank with their data, so and they are not familiar with the idea that the whole history of their transactions is available on a public database. So in that sense, it's closer.
Yeah, and it also depends on how Lightning develops. If you have only one channel open with the hub, then the hub will learn everything about every transaction you make.
That's correct. Yeah.
Right.
Another, yeah.
You want to add something?
Yeah, and another difference that people often forget is that the channels are persistent, right? So one of the big advantages currently of Bitcoin, I mean, we only have pseudonymity, but we have it. So if you use a new fresh address every time, it's already a bit, it's not a great model, but it's better than nothing, right? So we get a new identifier for every transaction, but one disadvantage of permanent channels is that they are permanent, right? You see the same actors doing multiple transactions.
Yeah.
And you can link those transactions within the channel.
I think we're already kind of running out of time. It's been a long day. Does anyone from the audience have questions, perhaps? Got one over there.
I'll shut it out. ZK Starks. Have you talked about
ZK
that?
Snarks.
No, it's not Snarks. Starks with the T.
ZK Starks.
What's the question?
Well, the question is, have you thought about that? It seems like very promising technology that seems to resolve all these issues that we've all been talking about for a long time. And I don't see anyone really discussing it, even though it's been publicly announced, I think 2 months ago.
Okay.
ZK Starks.
I could answer that maybe. I think there's a lot of it's not only ZK Starks. There is a lot of really great academic research going on currently in zero knowledge proofs. Really like zero knowledge proofs without trusted setup. There's bulletproofs, there's ZK Starks, and I think there are at least 3 other constructions in the past.
ZK Boo, right? ZK Boo is one of them, right?
Yeah, ZK Boo is one. There's a lot going on there, and this is really great to see so much actually real progress from the academic world. Still, these proposals are, depending on what you want to prove, they're still pretty slow, but we're coming closer. That's great.
I'd like to add like a kind of meta comment about all of those proposals, and some of them, of course, are actual implementations like Zcash, right? But my comment is like, you move into a very different world when you add cryptographic assumptions in order to create blinding of amounts. So the difference with like Zcash compared to, well, obviously compared to Bitcoin, but is, you've got those cryptographic assumptions, and you don't know whether those cryptographic assumptions have been broken. It's not just that they might be stronger assumptions, but you don't know if they've been broken. And I've already noticed a big kind of argument in the Bitcoin, amongst like Bitcoin geeks about, should we actually implement confidential transactions? It's not only about scalability trade-offs, it's about the, if we implement something based on Pedersen commitments, and then Pedersen commitments get broken, and then we don't find out, and somebody's printing infinite number of coins and nobody knows, is that acceptable? Arguably it's not. So it's not just a question of, well, this tech is too new. I think there's a bit more to it than that. And I feel like it's maybe to do with, what is the fundamental job of a blockchain? It's public verification, right? It's public verification. And if, the sort of heart and soul of Bitcoin is that the number of coins don't change, right? I don't think anyone's going to disagree with that, maybe. So if that can happen without anyone knowing, even if it's incredibly unlikely, are we going to get people to sign up for that? I think maybe not. So we might have to look at ways of using these very advanced technologies like zero knowledge proofs in a ways that are kind of off-chain, and hopefully making it so. What my ideal sort of future would be that the meaning of the transactions on the chain is not something that's actually revealing your private spending habits, but so you've got that sort of base layer which is very kind of open, but then the cleverness is perhaps around it.
Another question over there.
So I was wondering, there's going to be an increasing push from the sort of as the financial institutions and regulators get more involved in Bitcoin and crypto generally, and what kind of implications is that going to have for privacy? Because they're going to push for knowledge of where the two last transactions have come from.
Anyone?
We don't know the answer to that question.
They are using blockchain, not Bitcoin. At the moment, I'm sure they will come back to Bitcoin at some point.
No, but I think I agree with the meaning of the question, which is, if anybody's actually been involved in the last year or two, actually over the last several years in exchanging Bitcoin for fiat, you know that there's all kinds of clamping down going on. You hear stories of people receiving coins, and like 2 hops back, they were gambling or something, and then the coins get confiscated or something. Coinbase, I heard this story recently. I don't know if it's true, but stuff like that. I think it's a very serious problem. I think we just have to face up to the reality that and I remember at the end of 2013, I remember sitting in an airport and speaking to a friend of mine saying, next year's the year they're just going to crack down on Bitcoin. It's going to be hardcore. And I was so wrong, because these things move so slowly. But I think you're dead right that over the years it's getting more and more intense, and we've just got to face up to the fact that if they're going to take the attitude that you can only use Bitcoin with a name next to it, you can't even send a transaction without KYC, then I don't really know. We've got to sort of find our strength to actually, make the system work somehow, even if the governments are attacking us. Maybe they're not yet, but maybe they will be. I don't know.
We have time for another question.
Adam, I just wanted a clarification on your point, on your concern about crypto. Are you worried about there being backdoors in crypto systems, or are you worried about P equaling NP?
Well, I don't know if it's so much backdoor, but take, for example, what happened with Monero. I think it was it the beginning of this year or the beginning of last year? I forget. Like where there was a vulnerability because there was basically like a small subgroup attack. They had that Dan Bernstein curve, and they'd written the code and they hadn't checked that the point was on the curve. Now, okay, admittedly, that was an implementation error. That wasn't a cryptographic protocol error. But I just feel like there's some wiggle room there, and I can imagine just the whole point about these vulnerabilities in something like cryptography is incredibly complicated, and there are things that people haven't figured out yet, right? And maybe some really smart hacker figures it out before everyone else. Well, hello, he's got everyone's money basically. So that's kind of what I'm thinking.
If I can add something to that, I think also maybe adding to your statement a few minutes ago, I think it's not so much about buying those assumptions, at least not for me personally. I would be okay with Pearson commitments, I don't know. But it's also the question of whether we should force that to the system now, right? Because if I could redesign Bitcoin, maybe I could introduce that assumption from the beginning on. But now getting community consensus to change the security model is pretty hard, I think, and I'm not sure if that's the right thing to do, actually.
One more question in the back.
I was curious, maybe this is the wrong panel to ask, but what are your thoughts on the privacy limitations of Lightning? Because as Aaron mentioned, you need more than one channel to have any sort of privacy, but are there other more fundamental limitations?
Well, I guess I'll mention one thing that springs immediately to mind is the HTLC path. Currently we have a fixed pre-image. So, if you reveal the pre-image, you reveal the path, but that's apparently going to be fixed probably with this kind of new multi-hop lock thing, blah, blah, blah. That's just what comes to my mind, maybe.
Yeah, what seems to be a pretty strong limitation is that in order to do routing, you need to know the capacity of the channels, right? And that seems to be inherently in contrast with trying to hide those values on the blockchain. So maybe there's a solution, I don't know, but this seems to be pretty hard.
The overall capacity of the channel is known, but not the repartition.
Yes, sure, but still, like you see.
Oh yeah, you do see the capacity of the channel.
Yes, in the routing table basically, and yeah, that's a problem, I think.
One more.
Yeah, so one of the things that I'm thinking about lately is there a way of increasing privacy while still making sure that I'm not directly involved in criminal activity or supporting it indirectly? Like, I don't know, combining the web of trust, for example, with tumbling, something like that?
When you use your euros, are you sure you're not using euros that a criminal used?
Well, I know, I've gotten the answer a lot of times, but do you think there's not a way of like making it sure anyway? Like, for example, like having an algorithm that, I don't know, uses web of trust to identify the people and like that are close to my network that I might know, like with which I can then tumble more.
So we actually wrote it into our terms and conditions that you cannot use it for. You cannot use our wallet for illegal purposes.
Yeah, but I mean that also doesn't really help, right?
All right, I think we're wrapping up. Kevin, are we wrapping up?